Okay, Grace, if you could go ahead and stop sharing your screen, we're going to go ahead and get going. We are delighted. This is our fourth session in this first annual Southside Summit that PPNA has the pleasure of hosting with generous support from the Graves Foundation. The staff, you won't hear a ton from us tonight. We are pleased and really excited that we have community partners and board members who are functioning as the moderators and who will be really helping to guide the conversation with our amazing panelists. So with that, I'm not going to say much more other than turn it over to our wonderful community partner, Jordy Solomon, who will be tonight's moderator for this environmental justice session. Thank you all for deciding to be with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordy Solomon. I also go by Yordi. I just want to express first my deep gratitude for you being present here with us in this evening. I'm sure there's many other Zoom meetings that you probably have to attend, but we have a great set of moderator panelists here for us. So I won't be talking a lot, but I'll just be actually opening it up for them to introduce themselves. So Akira, if you want to go first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Akira. I use he, him pronouns, and I work as the Youth Campaigns Coordinator at Climate Generation, a Will Steger legacy. My work primarily centers around engaging high school aged youth and helping them lead and develop their own community campaigns around environmental justice issues. Do you want me to pass it, Yordi?
Yes, please. Thank you.
I'll pass it to Ansha.
Zaman. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as a policy coordinator for the Center for Earth, Energy, and Democracy, SEED. And we're an environmental justice organization based in the Twin Cities. We mostly do policy advocacy and community capacity building work at the regional, national, and local scale. Pass it on to someone? Or?
Yeah, I think we have one. Nah, is that you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Na Che, and I work with Akira at Climate Generation. We seek to engage the community and youth in climate solutions. I am currently their youth leadership mentor, and I was hired about 1 month ago, so don't have too much history with the group, but I did come into this work when I was in high school, when I was invited to come to some South Metro club meetings of other environmental clubs within the area that eventually turned into YEA Minnesota, which stands for Youth Environmental Activists of Minnesota. And that is currently the group of youth that I am mentoring. So grateful to be here, and I'm excited to see how the night unfolds.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us. Just for everyone knows, my background is also environmental justice organizing. I run in a couple of circles with these folks, not so much, but like I know they do amazing stuff. So I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. And I also just want to turn it to them and share a little bit about what they do and what brought them here. And we can go in any particular order, or Akira, if you want to start, or Ansha, or even not.
I'll yield to Ansha since I started last time.
Sure. Yeah, I can get us started. Are we doing the presentation now, or is this okay? Cool.
Yes, please. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So let me try to share my screen. While I'm figuring out sharing screen, I can tell you a little bit about myself. So I moved here from Michigan a couple of years ago. And the way I got into this field of work was I had mentors in Michigan, researchers who were working on energy access issues in Detroit. And that work really resonated with me, especially because I'm originally from Bangladesh, Dhaka, where energy access has always been a precarious issue. And so the environmental justice framework in the energy and how my mentor had applied it in the energy field really resonated with me. And so that's how I got into this work. And then I moved to Minneapolis because of SEED. So yeah, I think I have. So it says I can't share screen. Oh.
We saw your screen, but it was just a climate generation logo.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, all. There was a mix-up. Looks like we're getting it fixed now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, present. Is this good? Okay, great. Oh, technology. Good. Okay. So I can tell you a little bit about SEED. We're based in the Twin Cities, and we're an environmental justice organization. We mostly work with EJ communities, local leaders, and other grassroots organizations at the regional, national, and local scale. So if I had to divide our work into three big buckets, the buckets would basically be research, it would be policy advocacy, and then it would be community capacity building. And so because we only have a certain amount of time, I'll try to give you small examples of projects that we have at each of those scales. And I can mostly focus on the local work that we do. So we don't have a lot of state presence, but we do a lot of work within the Twin Cities, and most of the work that we do within the Twin Cities is around community capacity building. And I should have mentioned, all the work that we do is mostly focused on EJ and climate and energy issues. So at the local level, we use a lot of our resources, energy to create an ecosystem where EJ communities have the knowledge and the resources that they need to be able to participate in decision-making processes, especially because the energy field is so technocratic and so technical. It leaves out community voices, and so a lot of the work that we do is focused on bridging that gap and making sure that the field doesn't remain so opaque to community voices. And there are multiple ways we do it. So one of the ways that we do it is through running this cohort. We call it the energy efficiency cohort, and it's basically a cohort of smaller community-based organizations. A lot of them are neighborhood associations like PPNA. So for example, Can Do is a part of this cohort. Neighborhood Hub is a part of this cohort. And then there are also other smaller CBOs that work on housing rights or public health issues that are also part of this cohort. And so generally, the idea is to get these smaller CBOs engaged in climate and energy issues, especially if they haven't been engaged in this issue before, and sort of helping them draw those connections between housing rights and public health and energy. And so that picture that you see is a picture from one of the workshops that we had done last year, and the cohort came together to build these principles of what an equitable energy efficiency program design might look like. And it's amazing because these people had never interacted with energy issues before, and here they were sitting trying to figure out what an equitable energy efficiency program design might look like. We also do engagement around commenting, so getting folks to provide comments to public comments to state regulatory agencies to show them what they want their future energy system to look like. So for example, recently, Excel is filing its huge plan to the state regulatory agency, this huge plan on what kind of build out they want to do, what kind of energy they want to provide to us. And it's amazing how many community voices get left out of this process. So one of the projects that we're doing right now is getting folks engaged around what the plan is, what the plan that was submitted is, and how to provide how to provide comments, how to provide comments and how to engage with that process. We also do regular energy workshops around home weatherization, around energy assistance, so getting folks connected to resources that are available if you're having issues paying your bills, paying your utility bills, or if you're having issues accessing programs that can lower your energy bills. So that's a little snapshot of some of the capacity building work that we do. And then we also do policy advocacy work, some policy advocacy work within the state legislature and within the city council. And a really good example of that is the work that we did the last time the city's climate action planning was happening, which was in 2013, 2012, when we formed a coalition of other community-based organizations, and we called it the Environmental Justice Working Group. So we convened and facilitated that group, and that group came up with recommendations that they submitted to the city on what the city's climate action plan should look like. And through those recommendations, the green zones happened. And so many of you might have heard about what the green zones is, the Southside. So we're in the Southside. So you might be in one of the Southside green zones. That map shows what those two green zones are. So because of the work of that coalition, now we have designated areas in which the city is mandated to funnel resources to. And these are primarily areas that have been historically under-resourced and marginalized. So that's an example of policy advocacy work that we've done in the past. So this is an example of the regional work that we do. We're in the leadership of this network called the Midwest Environmental Justice Network. El Vejo, which is Little Village in Chicago, which if you follow environmental justice organizations, you might have heard of El Vejo. They're part of this network with us as part of the leadership team. And then Detroiters for Justice, I think, is also part of the leadership team. But it's a coalition of other EJ organizations in the Midwest. And the work, and again, even in this space, we provide capacity building. We provide trainings and resources. We also advocate for these organizations to access more funding. So we advocate for these organizations and within philanthropy to increase the carve out of funding that these organizations get. And a lot of our work currently is focused at the national scale. So we're part of this platform. We're part of convening this platform called the Equitable and Just National Climate Platform. And again, it's a coalition of other environmental justice organizations nationally, and some mainstream national greens like Sierra Club and NRDC and LCV. And basically, these organizations have come together to center environmental justice priorities that have often been left out, especially out of federal climate policy making. And given now there's this resurgence of realization that maybe EJ needs to be at the center of climate policy making, this platform has become that much more pertinent, and has gotten that much more attention because of that. But we had been doing this work for a couple of years now, and basically that slide shows the big priorities that we uplift through this coalition. And all these priorities have been named by the EJ organizations that are part of the coalition. But yeah, that's a quick snapshot of the range of work that we do and we've been doing. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Ansha. Actually, for our audience, if you have any questions, just keep them. We'll have a chance later on after Akira and Na also present. Feel free to drop them in the chat also. We'll get them in the queue for our Q&A portion of the agenda. So just we'll get to it, and if you have any questions for Ansha, which I'm sure you'll do, you're doing amazing work, so we'll get to it. but I just want to hand it off to Akira and talk a little bit about climate generation's work.
Sweet, thanks, Yordi. Yeah. Oh, okay, great. So you're gonna share. Okay, great. So, yeah, like Yordi is saying, Na and I are both from Climate Generation, a Will Steger legacy. If you wouldn't mind going a couple slides in. Yeah. So this is good. Thank you. So Climate Generation, the mission is to empower individuals and their communities to engage in solutions to climate change. And so one of the big vehicles of how we do this is through storytelling. So we engage a myriad of different audiences ranging from youth to educators, and educators in a more broad sense, not necessarily confining explicitly to school teachers, but also thinking about community educators as well. As in addition, we engage like the general public as well as influential, so those with political and other forms of influence in how climate policy comes to be. Thanks. So next, talking about Climate Generation's programming. So we essentially have like 3 different areas of our work. The first of which centers around education. So this takes the form of more large-scale events such as Summer Institute for Climate Education. So we have a network of educators, and our audience is actually nationwide. However, our base is predominantly in Minnesota. So the Summers Institute for Climate Education is essentially a series of workshops and educational opportunities for climate educators to gain more resources and support on how they might be able to engage their audiences more effectively in talking about a range of topics in the environment. Recently, highlighting the importance of centering environmental justice within climate education as a whole. And our network of climate teachers and educators is also called the Teach Climate Network. So we tap into that network for a variety of events, also cross-program too, which I'll get into. Additionally, we have a community education, community engagement set of programming. So like we put on events such as the Climate Conversation Series, which is like bringing on a series of like panelists to then engage our base in discussion on how they might be able to get involved further in climate activism. One of our recent initiatives in community engagement has been a project known as Eyewitness. So as I was mentioning earlier, like storytelling is one of the main ways that we seek to highlight the need for climate solutions at a systemic level. And so Eyewitness was a project that we took on to gather climate stories from folks all around Minnesota with the intention of creating a book out of it, and then further delivering that book to multiple policymakers to then as sort of like an influence to show why they need to take action specifically on climate justice, and talking about the intersections between climate change and other social justice issues. Another cool event that we did, which I was very excited about, is called Band Together. So this was the first event of its kind. So, you know, back when we were able to have concerts, we put on like a small show. Well, I wouldn't even call it. It was a show. And we had a variety of musical artists from across Minnesota come through. And it was an event that is meant to use the power of music to help engage people in thinking about their own climate stories, how they might be able to contribute within community efforts for climate activism, and so on. So the structure was essentially like an artist would come on, they would perform, and then another artist would come on and they would like share their own climate story and talk about why this kind of event and engaging in this kind of work is super important to them. And then the process would repeat, so on for the rest of the night. So that was really cool, and I'm actually hoping to engage in future events, specifically around music and climate activism. But that brings me to our final set of programming, which is our youth programming. So our audience for this is predominantly high school students. However, we do have some middle schoolers in our programming. And within our youth programming, Youth Environmental Activists, aka YA, is a campaign program, which I created and now run. It's essentially a cohort of 4 students right now in different communities across Minnesota. And I provide mentorship, resources, and support for each of them to lead and continue work in their community around a specific issue that relates to climate justice, with the end goal being that they create a proposal for the change that they want to see in their community, and then through the campaign are able to present that change to an elected body for them to then decide on implementing the change or not. So it's a really cool program designed to show youth at a smaller age that they have the power to influence their community, even if they're not old enough to vote, which is the traditional way that people are told they can make change. Do you want to talk about YA Network now?
Yes, I definitely will. If we can move to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one more.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I will start off by just saying a little bit about myself. I think we were asked to share how we got in the position that we're in. And so I will just say that like I said in the beginning of the meeting, was a part of Minnesota all the way in 2000, and I think it was 8 when it was still in formation. I went to the School of Environmental Studies, which was really influential and seminal in my development of what environmental justice is and the issues surrounding that and climate change. So I really didn't understand anything about activism at the time. I just saw the fact that there was a problem and that we needed to do something about it. So after that, I was out of commission for a good 5 years, struggling with my mental health. And so if anyone's out there struggling or have struggled in the past, acknowledge that that's also something that we should take into consideration. So I went to the U of M to finish my bachelor's degree in global studies with a focus on political economy and environmental change. And that was just this past spring, and was signed up for this program at an environmental center this fall, teaching and working with youth at a center called Wolf Ridge, but because of COVID, that was indefinitely postponed. And luckily, I found Climate Generation was hiring for the youth leadership mentor, which is the role that I am in now. So that's just a little bit about my past and how I got to this position at Climate Generation, which I'm very thrilled and grateful to be working for and with. So a little bit about Minnesota. Minnesota is currently in the process of changing its name to Network. It's under construction right now, but if you remember from Akira's slide or a few slides ago when he was introducing the youth program, that's why there's that discrepancy there. But much like Akira, my role is to provide mentorship and resources and support for students who are not just working on local campaigns, but might be working on some projects at their school, like a composting project or getting rid of single-use plastic campaign. In the past, speaking from what I've learned of by my supervisor, since I've only been here for a month, we've worked on the Minnesota Green New Deal, which was in collaboration with another network called iMatter that has kind of merged with Minnesota. And so although we've had no, I guess, sexy legislative wins, we are currently in the process of pursuing a new legislative campaign. So we are convening this Friday to talk about whether or not we'd like to write our own bill and create a coalition through partnerships that we have with other organizations within the Twin Cities and in greater Minnesota. Or if we would like to support existing bills and, you know, being very careful about not co-opting another group's work. But I think the youth would really like to follow, based on some of their comments, Black and Indigenous leadership, which also is tricky because we, of course, don't want to be tokenizing BIPOC folks, but finding people who are in leadership positions or are, you know, leading particular bills we would like to work with in either supporting them or working with them to create another bill. So yeah, that's a little bit about Yeah, Minnesota. Next slide, please. I'll have Akira talk about this and add some comments after he's done.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Na. That also is a good reminder for me because I forgot to share my own investment in this work, but I'll do that after I talk about our Climate Generation's anti-racism work. So this predominantly basically became a more bigger focus for the organization in the wake of the death of George Floyd. And so our anti-racism work right now is currently doing a lot of internal work on affirming our organizational commitment to anti-racism. And this takes the place of bi-weekly conversations facilitated by a planning team, of which I am a part of. And the goal of the discussions, well, the goal is broad because it's not really like, we're not setting a goal to then accomplish. It's really about helping facilitate a continuous process of understanding our own placement within anti-racism work and how we can continuously be doing this kind of work, both at Climate Generation and in our own personal lives. So our anti-racism discussions have been exploring the intersections of climate change and racial injustice. Some specific subtopics within that intersection is talking about how the relationship between policing and climate change and how that's mutually beneficial. We have also hosted multiple community conversations about the racially unjust impacts of climate change and ways to combat it through some of our aforementioned programming. And then also being intentional about lifting up the climate stories of BIPOC communities, specifically one example being through our eyewitness storytelling. And with that, I'll go back a little bit and just quickly talk about how I got into this work. So I actually got into the work my second year of college. I had started learning about environmental science at the University of Minnesota, and I was looking for opportunities outside of school to kind of engage more. And then I found this organization, which no longer exists now, but back then it was called Neighborhoods Organizing for Change. And that's where I met my mentor and now mentor and friend, Janice Watts, who really put me on and showed me about environmental justice initiatives in our community in North Minneapolis, and specifically showed me through her work that climate change is not an issue for the future and that it's something we need to be thinking about. Oh, this is going to impact people soon, so we need to do things like it's impacting people now. And it's just the fact that the impacts that they're feeling are invisibilized because of all of these different systems of oppression that are going on. And so that really motivated me to continue working in environmental justice specifically. However, I felt really frustrated with the University of Minnesota's lack of educational materials around that intersection, being a predominantly white institution and a research-based school. A lot of their analysis around environmental issues was very scientific and not very rooted in people or community. And so that's what really influenced me to take on environmental education specifically within the environmental justice work, because I just felt really strongly and honestly just tired of having to constantly bring up environmental justice to like my teachers or to my peers about how this is something we need to talk about when it really should just be already there that we should be discussing and thinking about when we talk about climate change overall. Yeah, I've had a lot of different opportunities to engage in EJ work since then. One of which being the Southside Green Zone. So shout out to Kelly Molman in the chat, who was a part of that work with me back then. So that was really cool. And yeah, that wraps up my intro.
Thank you so much, Akira and Ansha too. I also forgot to thank you at the beginning. I was so caught up in thanking the audience, which I still want to give gratitude to. But really, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us. And just, I mean, this is, I think what you said about like being rooted in people is really what resonated with me. A lot of environmental justice is just that, like if you really simplify it. So I really appreciate that. I want to invite actually Cori Lynn, who is our artiste extraordinaire, to share some graphic note taking and some key themes that they captured from the panelists. And then we're going to get into some question and answers. So don't forget to drop those question and answers, the questions you have in the chat, and we'll get to them hopefully as much as we can anyway. We'll try to keep to them. So I'll stop talking.
Thanks, everyone. So hi, I'm Cori. I am taking notes today. Today I'm calling in from Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi land in Chicago, but used to work at Powderhorn Neighborhood Association. So I'm happy to be back and be capturing this conversation. This is just like the beginning of my notes from everyone's intros. Thank you so much, Ansha, Akira, and Na, for sharing your insights. Just wanted to highlight some of the themes that I heard through the conversation was really everyone doing a lot of bridging work to bring the choices and like the decisions that are being made like in policy work and bringing people who have been kept out of those spaces before, specifically focusing on youth and small groups, youth on everyone's parts, but also specifically with Ansha talking about bringing like our local neighborhoods to that policy making too. I really liked and resonated hearing Na and Akira talk about how storytelling is a major vehicle for sharing the urgency and the kind of like the realness of EJ versus kind of leading with facts, which is I think how a lot of like environmentalism is, but really connecting with people and their stories. And then using a lot of creative arts and yeah, like with the band together activity to bring that. So thank you all. I'm excited to keep capturing notes from this conversation.
Thank you, Cori. It's so beautiful. I also just want to let the audience know if you have thoughts about things you think Cori should be considering and capturing, let us know in the chat and we'll pass it along, and she'll do her best in doing that. I'm not an artist in that way, so like I can't really speak, but I just want to pass that message.
Can I just jump in for 1 second, because I would be remiss, I think I've done it before. I want to acknowledge another artist collaborative that's helping us out. Although they are kind of dropping in graciously to all of our sessions to pull together a dynamic mural about what they're hearing, and that's the artist associated with Studio Thallow. And so that includes Dano Bayou Thomas, Olivia Levins Holden, and Nell Pierce. I can see that Nell is a part of the session tonight. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge their support and contribution to the summit overall and tonight's session. So thank you, and sorry for the brief public service announcement.
No worries, thank you. Yeah. So I just also want us to get to the questions, because I'm sure there's some people wanting to know some things from our panelists. So the first question is, what is one way that we can work together to ensure private development projects better reflect community priorities? And you can answer this however you want. I know it's a little bit broader. And I will start with Ansha, if you are ready.
Sure. So there's something called community benefits agreement, which a lot of community-based organizations like ours will advocate for and will look at. And I think there have been efforts in other cities. I know when I was in Michigan, in this city called Ypsilanti, very close to Detroit, there was a group that was trying really hard to get the city to pass a resolution that would force developers to sign a community benefits agreement before they put up any infrastructure in the community, or before they do any kind of business in the community. And I think the version that they did pass was not did not check all the boxes that the organizers wanted to check. But something like that can be an equitable way of holding accountability with developers, with businesses. But yeah, that's one example of a strategy that I can think of right now.
An alternative question, if it fits a little bit more to you, is what are key challenges to building awareness and support for actions that can combat climate change now? Which, if you want to answer the first one, that's fine. I just wanted to add that also. And I think y'all are doing great, but I just want to get to most of the questions. And Akira or Na, if you want to take that.
Yeah, the question was key challenges to building awareness and support for how we can combat climate change. Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that comes to mind is something that we're working on at Climate Generation, which, like Cori emphasized in the drawing, storytelling. So sharing individual stories and our personal accounts of how we experience climate change, not only within, of course, Turtle Island, but also globally. So what are people experiencing, or how are people experiencing droughts in Somalia? How are people experiencing the flooding that was happening in China? We need to be having some kind of an interaction between those that are in different climates, are in different regions of the world, not only to kind of understand that this doesn't just affect where we are regionally, but you know, this is a global issue, and it's something that we need to humanize by sharing these stories of our eyewitness accounts with one another.
Ansha or Akira, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say like some other additional challenges that I've picked up on have been just the amount of seemingly more immediate issues growing. So, I mean, we're like in the middle of a pandemic. We're also in the middle of really intense like racial uprising and economic disparities. So I feel that when some of the times when like engaging with folks, I can like understand why climate change necessarily wouldn't be their top priority when they're feeling like, I got to take care of my health. I got to make sure I have like a roof over my head. I have to make sure that my people and myself are safe. So I feel that with so many other immediate threats that are unfortunately becoming increasingly prevalent in our society right now, that climate change can feel very easily to be deprioritized, because it can be the common narrative is like, oh, we need to do this for the future, you know, in like 10 years, like if we don't do anything now, this is like going to be terrible, when the reality is like it's happening now. It's just like very slow, and just the impacts of it's an issue that like inflicts slow violence as opposed to more like visible violence on our communities. And so with that context, I think that's an additional challenge that comes with trying to raise awareness around climate change. I think another is just that I think it's the idea of how climate change is going to affect us as people isn't necessarily one of the largest impacts that's being pushed. I feel like when I was first learning about, what climate change is and everything, the first kind of consequences that I heard of was like glaciers are going to melt, animals are going to be losing their habitats. And there really wasn't a talk about like, oh, like those droughts that are going to push animals out of their habitats, they're also going to make it like near impossible for crops in certain areas to continue to be grown. Or glaciers melting is going to be raising water levels, which is going to predominantly impact coastal areas, and specifically folks from low income. So it's like, there really isn't the common narrative of how this is impacting people and specifically who this is going to impact, because I feel like if that was the predominant narrative that was getting pushed, a lot more people would feel more a sense of urgency in addressing this issue.
I think that's a really good transition to the next question around just narrative shifting and also just misconceptions. I know there's like a lot of misconceptions and like also deprioritizing of climate change in general. So I think this question is probably for Ansha, since you specifically work with like energy. What do you think are like current misconceptions about the inability to provide affordable and reliable energy? I know you talked about that like disconnect earlier. If you could elaborate a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think specifically, like I mentioned earlier, because energy is such a technocratic field, there's lack of community voices in that field, which can lead to misconceptions. And some of the misconceptions are have been peddled historically by lobbyists, by the fossil fuel industry. So some of those misconceptions exist because of that. I can talk about reliability a little bit, but there is that misconception that, when renewable energy sources or wind or solar will add reliability to will add reliability challenges to our electricity grid, when that doesn't have to be the case, or distributed energy sources will add reliability challenges to our grid, and that's something that that a lot of lobbyists, the fossil fuel industry, the big utilities will often peddle that myth. But more and more we're realizing that a diversity of sources actually builds grid reliability and makes our systems more reliable. Distributed energy sources build more reliability into our grid and make our electric systems more resilient. And like even the grid that we have today, that it constantly, this huge energy system that we have today, it constantly fails those that are most marginalized. So I think in our little boxes, maybe the ones that are most privileged don't see the reliability challenges because the grid doesn't fail them. But in a lot of low-income communities and communities of color, grid shutoffs do happen. I mean, I'm thinking of Hurricane Maria and how days and days and days went by and there was no electricity for an entire population. So that's one of the myths.
Thank you. I think that's important. There definitely is a disconnect, and also that deprioritization is kind of central to all of it too. Does anyone want to add anything to that question? I know it's a little bit more narrower to reliable energy, but you can also just broaden it to the work that you're doing if you'd like, or we can move to the next question.
I'll just say I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions around the inability to provide affordable and reliable energy is that I feel like there's a lot of fear around transitioning out of fossil fuels towards reliable energy around jobs. I see a lot like that as one of the biggest talking points. Fossil fuel industry jobs, when the reality is like the jobs are temporary. They rely on extracting resources. So eventually when those resources run out in that area, there's no longer a need for work versus investing in reliable sources of energy will create like jobs that are based in regenerative sources. So regenerative meaning like they won't necessarily run out because they're not relying on extractive methods. And so I feel that ties into the affordability of clean energy as well, because it'll just generate more jobs and people will have more financial security. And I personally feel that like those jobs should go to the communities that are most marginalized, those that would benefit the most, like what Ansha was saying as well.
Thank you. I would like to transition us to the next question, and then I also want to get to some audience Q&A because I'm sure some folks have some questions for you. This is like more of a broader question too. Not everyone, like, I mean, obviously a phrase that comes up a lot is like environmental justice in your work, and it's a central approach in the way that you do your work. But I think for people that are doing climate work in different ways, what are some ways that people can support environmental justice in their community and our community? How can they get plugged in today? What is like the first step? Is there a first step? And I will start with Na, if you're ready.
Yeah. So I definitely realize that there are people who don't have the time and the energy and perhaps the resources to do the research that I believe is necessary in order to not act. I think that people can come with limited information and make a call to their congressman or write a letter. But for sustained commitment and dedication to combating climate justice, I do feel as though there's a certain amount of knowledge and a foundation that needs to be established so that we have stable ground to fight the long fight. With that said, I believe in the power of education and understanding, for instance, how climate change is a matter of what some might call slow violence, how it's not immediately apparent. It can be very surreptitious and sneaky and doesn't make the headline news when it should be. You know, concepts such as this help at least me understand how this is an issue that's incredibly pressing as an understatement. And, you know, recognizing, I mean, circling back to what I said earlier about the challenges that we face, which is that we are not humanizing these stories of climate injustice. We need to be understanding how people around the world, specifically in the global south, are being impacted in ways that the global north doesn't have to worry about. So having kind of like a global scope and recognizing the interconnectedness that is the earth that we live on, you know, on a basic level, I think we can understand that. But in order to sustain the work that we're doing, we need to come from a more comprehensive perspective, a more comprehensive understanding of how global institutions work and how we're all connected underneath it.
Thank you, Na. I really like to start from like foundational, like what do you have and like what resources do you have available for you, and going from there. Akira, want to take a stab at that question?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with what Na was saying. I think having that foundation of knowledge and understanding, and honestly, self-awareness is pretty key to kind of not only doing meaningful work, but continuing to do meaningful work. Because burnout is like a real thing. A lot of people, I feel like I personally have experienced it, as well as I've talked with friends who have experienced it, and it's just like feeling a strong intensity around a certain issue or cause and just like giving it all you can continuously, which while it comes from a great place and the impacts are good, it isn't necessarily sustainable for long-term work, which is really what addressing these issues to their fullest extent requires, is being in it for the long haul. So I think that some of the foundational stuff that helps provide that sense of awareness is doing your research, kind of learning about the history of whatever issues, talking about environmental justice specifically, learning about the history of environmental justice, its roots in Black and Indigenous organizing. I think also just a lot of internal work around, you know, what kind of privileges do you hold? How does that impact the ways that you show up in different organizing spaces? How can you leverage the different resources that you have as a result of your privilege to those that may not have that? And I think that a good tangible way of getting involved also is with mutual aid. So redistribution of resources through community relationships. And I think that's, you know, something that I saw happening a lot over the summer in Powderhorn, just like a lot of community residents coming together to share food, supplies, etc. And I think that's just a great way of kind of redistributing what resources you have, and also providing like an avenue to get further involved in the work going forward. And finally, I'll say supporting and uplifting youth movements. I have seen youth who haven't got their driver's license yet, who have a stronger analysis of environmental justice than some adults that I've talked to. And they're definitely out here doing the work. And one of the biggest barriers to that work is that adults don't listen to them. Adults don't take them seriously. And that needs to cease like immediately, because they're definitely going to be the ones who are taking the charge and already are taking charge.
Thanks. That was a rich response. And I'll pass it to Ansha for the last 2 minutes before we get to audience questions.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just, echo everything Akira said and Na said, agreeing with them on all the points. I think we all have different levels of privilege and sit in different positions and sit in different positions and with different levels of influence. So a first step is always to evaluate that. Where does my power lie and what is my circle of influence? And then, specifically for environmental justice, one of the first things can be to start with learning more about your neighborhood and where you live, and the environmental injustices that exist in your neighborhood, in your city or in your county. A lot of, especially for BIPOC folks, a lot of the injustices that BIPOC folks deal with on a regular basis, such as affordable housing or public health or safety, might not seem like EJ issues, but they are. So a first step is also drawing those connections. We used to do this workshop some time ago at SEED, we used to do this workshop called What's in My Neighborhood? And we would do them in community centers, we would do them with families, and just walk people through all the infrastructure that exists in their neighborhood, and walk people through the community centers that exist in their neighborhood, so they could start thinking about how they interact with the infrastructure around them and how the infrastructure affects their everyday lives and how it affects their families' material needs. So I'll suggest that first step in, looking around, noticing what's in your neighborhood and who's being affected by what's in your neighborhood.
Thank you, Ansha. I think observation and just familiarity, it kind of brings belonging, which kind of, brings all of like why you're doing what you're doing. So it's important to kind of understand if you're in community, what type of like resources do you leverage and what type of resources can you actually, allocate if you're able. So from that, I just want to get to the questions from community members. First question from community member Karen. I hope I'm saying the name right? Karen or Karen? Okay, it's a long question, so bear with me. Have any of you done work around rail? Northeast Minneapolis in particular has multiple rail lines carrying hazmat, traveling through our neighborhoods, and our city keeps building affordable housing very close to active rail, not market rate, poor air quality, and a population known for high rates of asthma disaster. Disaster is a big concern. Are we prepared for a derailment and explosive disaster? Feel free to distill however you see fit. Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Sure, I can begin, and then maybe Na and Akira can hop in. That's a really good question, Karen, and a really important one. I'll say that we don't have organizers on staff, so we don't specifically organize around that issue, but a policy issue that we do advocate around that sort of gets to this scenario that you brought up is cumulative impacts. So, you know, again and again, we see that low-income communities, BIPOC communities will live in neighborhoods where they'll be subjected to multiple stressors. So this is an example of like having to live in a neighborhood, in a place where you're being subjected to pollution from all kinds of sources. And then there are also socioeconomic stressors that you're subjected to. So if you're in affordable housing, then you know you're more likely you're a person of color or low income, or you have a low income household. And so you have those socioeconomic stressors, and then you're also living next to a high transportation area. And so that might lead to you living in an area with poor air quality. And it's just not one source of poor air quality, but like multiple sources of poor air quality from transportation to industrial facilities that might be in your neighborhood that would add to that burden, that pollution burden that you're taking on for everyone. And so, and the way our state agencies work today, our state regulatory agencies work today is when they do permitting, when they engage in permitting decisions, they don't look at all these different level of stressors that a community is subjected to when they're giving permits to a new facility to continue polluting, or an old facility to continue polluting. So one thing we do advocate for is at the legislature is changing the rules of how these permitting decisions are made, so that these multiple levels of stressors are taken into account when these permitting decisions are made. So I don't know if, Karen, that answers your question, but.
Akira or Na, do you want to take that question as well? Pretty like dense, rich question. So I want to give you a chance.
Yeah, you know, I haven't heard of this particular situation in Northeast Minneapolis, but I think Ansha outlines the intersections very clearly. You know, this is not just a matter of if you are low income. It's not just a matter of if you're a person of color, and it doesn't deal just with race and class and environment. It's all of those combined. And, you know, it sounds like, unfortunately, a prime example of how those intersections can manifest in the city.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like we are ready to move to the next question. It's a mixture of, I think, related questions from Peter. Are you involved with indoor urban farm project in East Phillips on the old roof depot lot? If so, update us on that project or any other projects on the south side that we should be aware of. And a related question from Lynn, are you connecting to, maybe I should pause and give you a chance to answer the first question. But it's also related, so I'm just gonna say it. Are you connecting to work with Little Earth on the Verge of Resilience Hub for cheaper clean energy and outage protection? And if so, how?
Yeah, I don't know about Akira or Ansha, but this actually was something that came up in a meeting the other day with the youth that I work with, the East Phillips urban farm I'm talking about. So if folks are not quite familiar with the farm, there is a plot, I believe maybe 3 acres or so, that is currently a brick warehouse, I think like a roof depot. And the city is planning to demolish that to turn it into a new public works maintenance facility. And of course, this is in one of the city's poorest and most racially diverse neighborhoods. And so the proposal has been to build an indoor urban farm on this piece of land. And I believe there's supposed to be a bike shop and like a hydroponic farm raising fish and vegetables, and I think also a cafe. So there would be some jobs available as well that this urban farm would be creating. You know, the last time I interacted with those that were kind of protesting what the city proposed for that space was only a few months ago. And so I'm not currently sure what the status of that project is. I know that there is some backing from students at the U that are currently working on supporting the urban farm. And it may be something that, Minnesota chooses to dedicate some time and energy into, considering one of the members that I spoke with recently expressed interest in doing some kind of work behind that. I'm sorry, I don't have any more specifics, but yeah, that's just a brief overview of the urban farm, and that there is some interest on our end to be backing that project.
Thank you, Na. I also see that Grace dropped the link to it, so that should also be supplementary to what Na was saying. Do Akira and Ansha, do you want to comment on the previous question, or? Okay. I will take that as transition to the next question. So the next question is from the Institute for Market Transformation. With Excel's commitment to being carbon-free by 2050, what are you pushing them to go further on this, on in their plan? And I will start with Ansha on this one.
Yeah, so like I had mentioned, really our focus with the IRP has been to make sure that capacity and resources are available for community voices to be part of that process. So IMT is a part of this. I don't know if who from IMT is on the call, but we have some IMT colleagues on that planning team. And really where SEED is at is we've been coordinating or facilitating the process of making sure that there are stipends and funds and resources available for folks for community members and organizers and leaders, specifically BIPOC leaders who want to be part of the process and want to be part of this decision-making process and have concerns about our peace plan. We're not specifically organizing around, any agenda around the IRP, but yeah, where we're sitting is we're trying to make sure we're making sure we are able to allocate resources to folks to organizers that want to be heard, specifically BIPOC organizers.
Thank you, Ansha. I also want to just skip to the next question because I think it's a good way to tie it, to tie everything together as we are finishing at 7:15 with Q&As. The next question comes from Murray, and they're asking, what are some urgent action steps we can take right now in response to current EJ issues? My mind comes to line 3 and how the governor The government is to decide on permits. Please elaborate on current steps we can take to contribute to your efforts, to your efforts. And I will start with Na, if you are ready.
Yeah, we're definitely aware over at Climate Generation that the permit decision, the multiple permit decisions need to be made or will be made on Saturday. So some of the youth have been just making phone calls, and if they're not making it through to the inbox or the voicemail inbox, committing to writing letters. So at this point, I don't know. I mean, I'm not as tapped in, honestly, as I wish I was and should be to what's going on with Line 3. But I imagine there must be some kind of a protest or gathering happening on Saturday, maybe with, if anyone's familiar with Northfield against Line 3, and also, there's the pipeline resistance team working at MN 350 that's been dedicated to fighting Line 3. So in terms of immediate things that you could do, I would say the age-old calling and or writing to your congressperson, and also just, I guess, poking around on other websites that are working more fervently against Line 3. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Na definitely expanded on like what around action steps for Line 3. I also remember seeing, I was trying to look through my inbox for this, but it is disappeared. But I think I heard somewhere that there is a, they're taking public comment on the Line 3 decision this Friday, I want to say. But that's something that came to mind. But yes, that's definitely something that's very, it's on our agenda to engage with the youth. I also am making calls and sending emails around that. So I feel like right now that's one of the easiest ways to kind of make your voice heard on that decision-making process. And if somebody happens to know about the public comment session for Line 3, that would be great to get more information, because I just know that it's happening at some point in time. Yeah, I'll pass it.
Yeah, I'll just agree. I'll just agree with Akira. Right now, where people are at is they're trying to get folks to call the governor, write to the governor, write to the MPCA, Assistant Commissioner Laura Bishop. So that's where the organizing is happening.
I also just want to add that I think Line 3 is like really urgent, obviously, but feel free to talk about other actions people can also take outside of Line 3 if you can think of, but if you have like a lot of information on Line 3, I just want to constrain, I don't want to constrain that way. Yeah, just want to add that.
Yeah, there's actually a slide that we never got to, that Akira and I never got to. I don't know if it's possible to pull it up, but in our presentation, we had a slide on eyewitness letters, which is what we're calling letters that give firsthand accounts of people's experiences with climate change. So, yep, that's the correct slide. So what we're planning on doing is handing out this book, book that composes personal stories of people within Minnesota on how climate change has affected their lives. And we will also be passing along letters from individuals, of citizens demanding that whoever has been voted into become a legislator, that they take bold action on climate change. So we actually are looking for people to submit these letters and have a website. I don't have the link right now, but I'll share it in the chat, or have someone share it in the chat, a template that you can follow and questions that you can answer that you can then submit to us at Climate Generation, which will then eventually go out to legislators in January of 2021. And is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Akira?
No, I think you pretty much got it. I think the eyewitness is a great next action step. Yeah, we're looking for letters from all the districts across Minnesota. And yeah, you pretty much nailed it on that.
Yeah, I think that just to add one more thing, I think something that Climate Generation is very aware of, the fact that we can't only rely on the science. You know, as much as I would like to, we need to humanize this collective experience that we're going through right now and for the foreseeable future. So this is one, I think, crystallization of value that we have at Climate Generation, which is sharing stories person to person.
Wonderful. As we are nearing more and more the closing, I just want to give you all a chance to say a way to get, how can people reach out to your, either your organization or yourself, or if there's any parting words you want to just bestow upon us before we exit. I just want to give you a chance. I will start with Ansha.
I just want to thank everyone for being here, for sharing their evening with us. There's so many Zoom calls and things going on, so thanks for spending this hour and a half with us. You can reach us. You can reach me at, I can drop my email if that's helpful. azaman@seed.org. So yeah, feel free to drop me a note if you have more questions about anything that I talked about today. Also, if you want to learn more about some of our national work, you can go to this website. And of course, our local website is seed.org. But thank you. And thank you, Yordi, for facilitating this. You did a great job.
Thank you. Akira?
Yeah, I'll also echo gratitude first towards you, Yordi, for great facilitation, and the rest of you all for joining us tonight. I was very grateful to be a part of this panel and to talk with Ansha and Na about how we can further support the climate justice movement in our own communities. And as for how you can reach us, thanks, Grace, for putting that in the chat. There's also, if you wouldn't mind sharing like just the last slide or a presentation, there's some other social media info for Climate Generation on there where you can further engage with us, and feel free to shoot me an email if you want to talk further.
Grace is on it. And then Na, do you want to say anything, any parting words?
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to share parts of our work and parts of ourselves with the Southside and have this virtual sense of community. If you see us on the street, you know, just, I don't know, I typically wave to strangers anyway, so. But yeah, I guess my parting words would be, you know, when I first started getting into environmental work in high school, it was largely in due part to having written as a final project or paper my environmental ethic. And that has actually stuck with me up until this day. What I value, what I stand for based on the studies that I had pursued during that time. It really made clear for me what my relationship with the earth is, what I would like it to look like, and what I would commit to do in, you know, addressing those concerns, the issues that we face. So I think, you know, in the process of writing a letter to legislators, I think this is an opportunity for people to connect back to themselves on why the environment means so much, or how it means so much, and how people are being affected by it. It's an opportunity to reflect and share that reflection with others. I really suggest and urge and plead people to send us letters of your words as to how you experience and move through climate change, so that we can send it to legislators.
Thank you, Na, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Akira, thank you, Ansha, and thank you, Na, again. I am just gonna also express my deep gratitude. This is such an honor to facilitate, also just be here with you in this Wednesday evening. I don't know what time is anymore. And I'm going to pass it to PPNA staff to just talk a little bit about some housekeeping stuff. And yeah, thank you again.
If I could just say one last.
Oh, of course, Akira, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association for putting this all together and organizing this.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And this is me just simply saying we love the thumbs up, the claps, or the confetti, whatever you want to use as reactions. Excellent. No, seriously, we are so grateful that you guys were the voice in the faces. Let's just be real. The voice in the faces of such a critical, salient issue in our community with respect to environmental justice, and just how you're going about your work, whether it be through policy or narrative. I think it was such a rich session. So thank you. You have our deepest appreciation. Yordi, they've already indicated you held it down. Thank you for being a wonderful moderator. Na, Ansha, and Akira, we are so appreciative of all of the wisdom and the insight that you have somehow been able to squeeze and amass into your frames and into your spirits, into everything that we bring to the table. My wrap up is really about thanking some of the people that have been behind the scenes. I've been remiss to thank PPNA staff, but certainly a shout out to Hannah and Grace, truly for being wonderful and amazing, and Ashley, excuse me, partners in all of this work. And then of course, our artist who will be helping us to enliven how these sessions come to life for the community members who weren't able to participate in the actual sessions. So the art renderings will be on the web, on the Southside Summit website, Southside Summit Minneapolis website by the end of next week, as well as the notes, the written notes, and additionally the recordings will be available. We want to give a special shout out and thank you to the Graves Foundation, who is the lead sponsor for our ability to be able to bring all of this together this year. We also want to acknowledge Studio Thalo, who I had mentioned before, other artists who have been popping in and out or will be popping in and out each session to help, again, tell this story in a more creative and artistic way. We also want to acknowledge the PPNA board for being such huge supporters and partners in all of the initiatives and work that we are attempting to do in service of and alongside and with community residents, business owners, and other community partners. We are just deeply grateful to be a part of this corner of the world in an attempt to, as best we can, inspire and give information that gives people ways of thinking about how they might engage in strengthening our communities beyond chaos, beyond crisis, beyond elections, beyond pandemic. There is so much more for us all to do. We are grateful for every soul that joined us tonight. We see you, we appreciate you, we care for you deeply. That is all that we have for you. And if you decide to join us, please check us out for the final series of sessions on Friday, November 13th for our livability and safety session that will kick us off at 4 o'clock. And then we will end with self-care and wellness as the last session with equally amazing panelists and moderators to bring us on home. We appreciate you, everyone. Have an amazing evening.